you've been able to take a little bit different approach this year by making the 2 trades rather than just signing free agents. Just overall, a more aggressive approach than you've been able to take these last few years because it just fell into place, or was that the plan?
I think it's season and opportunity, and I wouldn't necessarily say we were out just saying, hey, we're going to trade for guys rather than sign guys. It just so happened the guys turned out that way, and we just felt value-wise, whether it's compensation in terms of the pick, whether it's what you ultimately pay a guy, we just felt like the value was there this time. In these 2 situations, making a trade. But it wasn't a foregone conclusion we were just going to be out here looking for trades. We entertained trades quite a bit. We entertained them at the trade deadline last year and didn't make some, and entertained other players in trades, and they don't come to fruition. Everything's got to work, including the business, and as well as if you're ultimately going to trade for a guy, what that compensation is.
Just having the compensatory picks available to trade now, how much does that factor into being able to do things like that?
Well, that's what it is. I mean, you're ultimately, when you're signing free agents, especially unrestricted free agents, the term, you're ultimately taking away from compensatory picks. So when you're signing guys, especially if you're losing guys, which we did, with Dalton and Connor McGovern and Noah and Gifford, those are all guys that if we don't end up signing guys that that work against those picks, then you get those compensatory picks.
I know you said that things worked out differently this year, that you have done this all, but do you feel that you tried to be more aggressive or do things just to make changes this year that you didn't in the past?
I think it was ways that we, were able to, fill needs, which we always try to do. And I know some people think sometimes we're more aggressive than others, but we've made it pretty clear we were after some juicy type receiver, if you will, and obviously, looking at that corner position as well in terms of things that we felt like we needed to, do for our football team. And then, of course, signing back some guys that we needed to do. If we didn't get our own, it would have made it more of a need if we lost guys, whether it's a Wilson or a Van Der Esch or somebody like that, then, it becomes more of a need if you don't keep your own guy.
You mentioned the trade deadline versus now. To have that Texans take on $6 million of Cook's salary, how helpful is that?
I mean, it all boils down to what the final business is. I mean, I don't want to get into the details of any one thing about it, but certainly, when we're weighing what we want to do, whether it's draft pick compensation or what ultimately the business is going to look like for us, which is, what's our cap hits over the next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, those all come into play.
What needs are left? I mean, you've done a good job of taking things so you can be pure in the draft, but do you need to address guard? Do you need to address nose tackle?
We got a guard.
Okay.
So, I feel real good about him.
You're going to work into it.
Yeah, I think he can do both, which I always think anytime a player, has flexibility, can play several positions, that's a huge plus. I mean, makes the player even more valuable. But, we're always looking to improve our football team, and, obviously, when we lost Dalton, and, probably always going to look to beef that up. Mike really enjoys using, or not enjoys, but it's a big part of what he's about is to use tight ends. And so, whether it's the draft or whether it's free agency or a trade, we're always looking to improve our team.
How do you view Terrence Steele? Is he part of that tackle group? Can he move inside?
I think it's the best 5 guys, at the end of the day. I mean, Mike's always preached that, and, it's early. We'll see kind of once, we got a new offensive line coach. We'll see, he gets them out there, gets his hands on them, sees what they can do, and we'll figure out, what are the best 5 guys and, what makes us the best football team for 17 games plus hopefully the playoffs.
Where do things stand with Hankins at the moment, and is Hankins, Watkins kind of a one or the other? Are they tied in some ways?
No, not necessarily. I mean, we obviously, with those 2 guys not signed yet, I mean, that's an area where we need to do it. If we can do it with them, that's good. I mean, there are guys. We're involved with working on both of them, and we'd love to have them back.
Not one or the other, both.
We'd take them both back, absolutely.
Okay.
We had them both on the team last year.
We're kind of in an environment with running backs where guys are getting paid $2 million and $4 million. What's your Tony Pollard master plan contractually?
I think that, for me to speak to his business is unfair to him. But, obviously we've got Tony for next year for sure. Would we like to have him tied up for 3 or 4 years? Of course we would.
Why didn't y'all offer Zeke?
Oh, something fall
Why,
out.
why didn't you offer Zeke a pay cut?
I think, when you got players, and we've had them over the years, whether it's a Emmitt Smith, whether it's a DeMarcus Ware, these type of players, you've got such respect for everything that they've done for your organization. And sometimes, the best thing is to let them get a feel for what the market is. The last thing you want to do is do anything that would be insulting to a player, to a great player like Zeke, who's one of the best players to ever put on a Cowboys uniform, and he gave us everything he had. And a great competitor, and wish him nothing but the best if it turns out he doesn't return. But we never rule anything out around here. But, there's sensitivities when you get into making offers in this game.
A player status like him, and you mentioned DeMarcus too. I mean, there's a point where what their actual value is, the way you project the team, is below certainly where they see themselves, and you don't necessarily want to part on those.
And
terms.
almost always the case when you're talking about great players. I mean, it's just always the case, and that's what makes them great, is they think a lot, not in a selfish way, but they have, they perceive themselves as a great player, and they are, and it just becomes, how you make the business work. It always boils down to that, unfortunately. And there was no joy when Emmitt went to Arizona. There was no joy when DeMarcus went to Denver. But you look up, and there's a lot of goodwill still between DeMarcus and the Cowboys. You see him around the building all the time. Emmitt Smith, you see around the building all the time. I think we've, for the most part, worked through these tough situations in a good way, and hopefully we're doing it in spades with Zeke, because there's nothing but love and respect for Zeke Elliott.
We've talked several times about possible Dak contract extension. That's on the agenda. Where are you guys on that process?
Yeah, we won't comment on that. Those are things, hopefully, that won't become front and center. You wake up one day and they're done, but really don't want to comment on that.
But that's still the focus.
I'm not going to comment on it.
You always talk about wanting a pure, go into the draft as pure as possible. Have you positioned yourself as good as you have at any time over the last maybe 10 to 12 years going into this draft of being able to do that?
Well, we'd like to think, you always hope so. I've thought so in the past too, that we could go pretty pure on what we needed to do. But I do feel really good that whatever player happens to fall to us there at 26, which is a tough spot. There's usually never been 26 first rounders on our board. I doubt that'll be the case this year. And the further you get back from the 18 to 20 players you usually have, there's lesser chance that one of those first rounders you have are going to be there. So, we just really, I think we've put ourselves in a good position that we can, even if it's, not necessarily a guy with a first round pick. If there is, then great, let's take him, regardless of position. If it's not, then, hopefully you still take the best player on your board and you feel good about it.
Y'all talked a lot last year about Tony and Zeke being a 1-2 punch, different running styles helps keep the defense off on their toes. With Mike wanting to run the ball so much this coming year, what do you need beyond Tony to?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, if you found, in a perfect world, you'd find a big physical back that could complement Tony. Obviously Zeke was extremely successful in short yardage and goal line, and he's one of the best. I think he's right there at the top in terms of touchdowns scored there inside the 5. He was pretty efficient.
Last year you had a pretty successful draft where you had fifth rounders making plays, Deron Bland, undrafted guys. Is there such thing as having confidence going into the next year? And you drafted well here the last 5-10 years.
Yeah.
Is it were those things just start at zero again, or is it like we feel confident in the system we've got going?
We feel confident in our system. We always want to improve it, but part of the reason I think we've been confident in our system is we are able to take care of a lot of our needs before we ever get to the draft. And I feel like we've done, a really good job of that. You're never going to take care of every last one of them, but you certainly want to try to do as many as possible before you pick, and then I think that allows you to really have a successful draft.
One was at kicker. Where would you assess where you are at kicker now and what you want to do there at a training camp?
Well, I just think we're going to continue to. We'll look young in the draft. I mean, it'd be nice to start with a young guy that could go out there and be successful and have the right nervous system to be successful, and have a guy around here for 3 or 4 years. I mean, that'd be the perfect fit. But you always, there's these veteran kickers who come in and they do great jobs, and certainly that's. We're going to try to solve it one way or the other. But, right now I'd say that's certainly an itch that needs to be scratched at some point.
With that, too, is a little so many games now are decided by 3 points or less that you still rarely see many kickers go, even in the late rounds.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that the case? And do you think it will the pendulum swing a little bit on that?
I think it's just the unknown of how he's going to do in a bigger stage. And I think that's the difficult thing, is to really get your hands around, is this young guy going to be able to step in and step onto a bigger stage and make the kicks? And you just never know till you get your hands on them and what they're like. And I think we've got one of a great evaluator in Bones. We've got great evaluators on our scouting staff that'll do a great job of looking at this. And they've got 3 or 4 guys that they really like, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
This time of year requires so much focus on free agency in the draft, but what kind of conversations have you had with Mike the last few weeks about him play calling, what the scheme vision is, or what stands out to you about what he's doing?
Quite a few. I mean, obviously, Mike's very confident in this role. He's done it a long time and done it at the highest levels. I mean, he's won Super Bowls calling plays. He's won a lot of playoff games calling plays. So, I mean, certainly very comfortable with where he is on it, and I know he's very confident in it. In terms of what he wants to do and what he wants to see this team do, and Jerry and I are very comfortable with his vision for our offense. And is it going to look totally different? I don't think so. But as Mike said, there's probably 10 to 15%, 20% of things that maybe there was a little difference of opinion. How we should execute, how we should operate, and so those things you'll probably see different. But Kellen. Great. I mean, he was outstanding if you look at our offense. But, Mike obviously thinks we can improve upon it. Not to take anything away from Kellen. I mean, Kellen's going to grow from this move. I'm sure he's going to do a great job with the Chargers. But Jerry and I are very comfortable with what his vision is for what we're going to do philosophically on offense.
Not with Mike specifically, but generally in football, do you think there's such thing as a play caller getting rusty if they haven't called plays in a while?
I mean, that'd be hard for me to think. I mean, I don't think Mike's going to be rusty if you're asking me. I think he'll do a great job.